fourth of our weekly Hearts Academic Skills webinars. In the first two webinars in the series, which you can watch on Canvas or via YouTube, we did a kind of introduction to the principles of academic writing. We also had a session where we looked at various elements of study skills, including note-taking, some of the principles behind referencing, and the tools that you can use for reference management. One thing I'd like to just repeat before we move on is that there is not one referencing style used at the University of Hertfordshire. It entirely depends on the program that you're on, and any guidance you get on your program will tell you, anytime you have an assignment, it will tell you what referencing system to use. And if you use a really good referencing management tool like Zotero is my favorite, but if you use something like Zotero or EndNote or Mendeley, it will actually take care of some of the technical stuff for you. And best of all is via your university login and password, you can access a resource called Cite Them Right, and that will tell you, well, that will show you how to reference in your specific subject area. But what we're going to do today is go beyond the surface and into kind of like deeper stuff of how we start tackling the assignments that we are set as university students. And in this webinar, we'll be looking at how we understand the requirements of a university assignment. And in future webinars, so in the second, in the weekly webinar next week, we're going to do an example of how we would build an assignment from zero. So we're going to start by just having a bit of a recap about what we already know about academic writing and for university assignments. And there are 3 statements on the screen. I think I've got 20, I've currently got 25 people in the webinar and 17 on the Menti. So I've just posted a link to the Menti again. And what I'd like you to do with these 3 statements is just to click to show me whether you agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or whether you're somewhere in the middle in relation to each of these statements. So the first one is writing well is a talent that you either have or you don't have. The second one is there is one standard way of writing at university. And the third is you need to find out all you can on the topic or title and then put it all in your assignment. So I'll give you a moment to answer that. Okay, so very clearly, most of you seem to be agreeing with the last statement quite strongly. You need to find out all you can on the topic or title and then put it all in your assignment. But you're less convinced that writing well is a talent you either have or you don't have. Okay, next slide, I've got 3 more statements. Writing critically is when you say what is negative or incorrect about something. In an assignment, you should use lots of quotations, and being original means coming up with a totally new idea or making a new discovery. Again, I'll give you a couple of minutes to mark your position in relation to these statements from strongly disagree to strongly agree. If you're watching a recording of this video, then you can still participate, but you can write these statements down. You could draw a line. You could just give each statement a score from 0 to 5. So 5 would be strongly agree, and 0 would be strongly disagree. Okay. So we started out, the first few people who responded were strongly agreeing to the first and the third statement, but that's come down to somewhere closer to neutral. Okay. If anyone has joined the webinar late, then please feel free to join the Menti via the link in the chat. And I'm going to move on to I've shown you 6 statements. I'm going to show you another 4 in 2 groups of 2. So the first one here is you shouldn't say what you think or use I in your assignments, and you don't need to explain things that your lecturer already knows. So we have 20 people in the Menti. Let's see how quickly we can at least get 10 responses to these statements. It's really interesting because I can see that the average scores for a lot of these statements are falling kind of in the middle of the line, but it doesn't look like we've got lots of people who aren't sure. We've got people who either agree or they disagree. Okay, but there's more agreement for you shouldn't say what you think or use I in your assignments. And there's slightly less agreement about you don't need to explain things that your lecturer already knows. Okay, and 2 more statements. These are the last of my statements to share with you. Good writing at university means writing in long sentences and using lots of long words. And good writers think and then write, check, and hand in. And that was, we very quickly got 10 responses there. Almost everyone strongly agrees that good writers think, then write, check, and hand in. But not many people think that good writing at university means writing in long sentences and using lots of words. In fact, most people disagree. Now, I've shown you 10 statements, and perhaps I'm going to shock you all now by telling you that I think they are all myths. They are all the kind of statements that you may commonly find about university writing and about what makes a good assignment. But I'll just go through them individually to talk about why I think none of them are actually true. Writing well is a talent you either have or you don't have. It's certainly not something that you're born with. I've worked with lots of people, lots of students over the years who have found university writing really difficult at first, but have become brilliant at it and have been published later in life. I mean, lots of people get published and they all start somewhere. So no, writing well is not a talent you either have or you don't have. It's a skill that you can develop through a combination of reading, thinking, and writing, so by practicing. I think most of you disagree about there being one standard way of writing at university. No, there isn't one standard way of writing at university. That's because we have different types of writing that we ask you to do. So reflective writing is very different to writing a report on some research you've done, or writing an essay. And the way that you write for one subject might be very different to the way that you write for another. Most people agree that you need to find out all you can on a topic or title and then put it all in your assignment. The reason why this is a myth, the reason why this isn't true, is because all assignments have our word limit. You can't put everything into every assignment that you write. So it's really important to think about how, and we're going to explore this more later. You're being when you have a university assignment, you're being asked a very specific question, and you want to know as much as you can. You want to find out as much as you can about that topic within reason. You don't have to go outside of the topic. As much as you can about the topic is good, but you're going to have to filter that so that it answers the question you've set. So actually, I often see student writing going wrong at university because they try to put too much information into an essay, and they might start with a long description of background before they start answering a question. Look, people are changing their answers now, so that's really clever of you. Well done. Okay, and I have already said that all of these are myths, so I'm going to talk about like why I disagree with them all. So writing critically is different to like criticizing. So I think this is a really tricky area at university, but we're here to help you with that. It's something that I think becomes clearer over time, but it's actually really difficult to define what we mean by critical, and we have a problem because the word like critical. If I ask you, oh my gosh, I'm just looking at my appearance right now. And if I ask you, what do you think of my hair? I think you should all be critical of my hair. It's absolutely disastrous. Oh, I really hate how my hair is at the moment. I'm 51 years old. I'm starting to go bald, but I've got kind of too much going on at the moment. I'm too busy to have a haircut. I'd like to have my hair cut short, but I'm scared that if I have my hair cut too short, you'll just see that I've lost a lot of it. So you're very welcome to give me criticism of my hair and tell me it's messy, it lacks style. You can even tell me you don't like the color if you want. I don't mind. That would be criticism, and that's not what we do in academic writing, in academic discussions. When we're critical, what we're typically doing is holding and being open to multiple perspectives on a topic at the same time. Having a little bit of doubt, asking questions, not just believing everything we see or read. And I think really importantly, this is not like a typical definition of critical, but this is how I would see it, is to recognize that everything has a context and everything is related. Okay. You go to a library and you pick up any book, like that's not the only book on the topic, and the people who wrote that book will have real lives. They have real reasons why they've written their book. Their book will be related to some other books in the subject area. They won't be the first people to have written about the subject, even if they've got a really specific angle on that subject. So being critical is actually, in terms of the way we think, is just being aware of all of those things whenever we do any reading and when we do writing. So yeah, writing critically is not about being negative, and it's not actually about criticizing things. You should use lots of quotations. No, most people think that this is a bad idea. I don't think there's anything wrong with quotations when you've got you found a really interesting expression or way of saying something, and you want to tell your reader, so this author says, and you want to quote it exactly and maybe comment on what they've said and how they've said it. That's a good reason to use a quotation. But there's no clear relationship, say, between the number of quotations you use and the overall quality of your work. So the idea that you should use lots of them is neither here nor there. And I think most of you looked a little bit doubtful about being original means coming up with a totally new idea or making a new discovery. And no, I think most people in this webinar are postgraduate students. When you do a dissertation at the end of a master's degree, you are maybe making a very small contribution to the knowledge in that area. Maybe you're reporting on you might do some research of your own and report something that you found. You may not be the only person in the world who's found that information, but you certainly don't have to discover anything new. It doesn't need to be a totally new idea. Being original often just means like forming your own position. We'll explore this further in the next webinar, in webinar 5. So taking your own position and typically like trying to express things in your own words is what we will think of as original. You shouldn't say what you think or use I in your assignments. Well, it really depends on the assignment, and it depends on the subject area. In my own academic writing, I use the word I quite a lot. But some people ask you not to use I in academic writing, typically because they don't want you just to be relying on only your own experiences or opinions you had before you started your course or before you started reading. So sometimes there's a good reason why someone might ask you not to use the word I in academic writing, but actually there's nothing wrong with the word itself. And typically people do want to know what you think about a topic, but we just have to find appropriate ways of expressing that. Okay. You do actually need to explain some things that your lecturer already knows. Usually on a module, when you're set an assignment, because we want to kind of like check your understanding and your knowledge, and also maybe to look at your skills and give you a chance to develop your skills of communicating that knowledge. So it's unlikely you are teaching the marker anything new, and it's quite likely that you are using or repeating some arguments that your lecturer will already be familiar with. So you will have to explain some things that they already know. Good writing at university means writing in long sentences and using lots of words. I think we've covered this in previous webinars. Good writing needs to be precise, concise, and respectful. And actually, being precise, being clear is about using the right words, not uncommon words or words that are designed to impress someone, because they often won't. Finally, almost everyone strongly agreed with the statement, good writers think, then write, check, and hand in. I want to suggest this is also a myth. I would disagree with this because it makes it look like writing is this really clear line of a process. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 step. It's much messier than that. It's more circular than that. It's you think, you read, you think, you write, you think, you read again, you might do some checking, you might do some more writing, you might then go back to thinking, you might go back to more reading, and then it's a much more circular process than this sentence suggests. So yeah, as a university student, you do need to do all of these things, but not just one and then the next and then the next and then the next. Okay, so point here is that I want to suggest that these 10 statements that we've been looking at are all myths. And actually what we need to do instead is focus on what assignment briefs are asking us to do and following the instructions that we're given. And in fact, I would always argue that following the assignment instructions are the most important thing that you can do as a university student. I've said before that academic writing needs to be precise, concise, and respectful. And in previous webinars, we've talked about academic writing always being a response to what others have written. So always being about your reading. Here's a question for you. Why do you think we have to write assignments? And I'm really interested in your answer to this question. Why do you think we need to write assignments at university? Now, I'm asking you this question, but in 25 years working in higher education, only one student has ever asked me this question, like, why do we have to do writing for assignments? Only one student ever asked that, and it was probably the best question I was ever asked. But really important that we have a think about this and consider why we write. Why are we asked to write? Else. I'll repost the link to the Menti just in case there's anyone who hasn't seen it, because I've got more people in the webinar than in the Menti. So first answer I have here. An evaluation method to check if the topics explained by the teacher were understood. I think that's a good question. That's a good answer. But I might also, I mean, look, I hope you have understood by now that I'm like a nice guy and I'm on your side and I'm here to help you and to support you. But I also have to be honest with you, right? I think checking topics explained by the teacher were understood or not, that could be done with a multiple choice test, right? That could be done with an oral question. To test students' understanding, yeah, okay, but like, why writing? Why not a multiple choice quiz? Develop writing skills and come to know at what level of understanding we are standing. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Yes, perhaps we actually want you to develop your skills. Perhaps we actually see something valuable in being able to write and being able to communicate through writing. I think this is really important that we, perhaps we don't say it clearly enough, but at university, we do design our assessments to help you to learn. This is called assessment for learning. So if we set an assignment, it's a way of being sure that you're going to spend time reading for that assignment, thinking about the assignment, and the time that you spend writing is also like, writing is learning, writing is thinking, writing is learning. And an exercise on an already known topic. I don't know if you mean like that's also a way of like revising, which is true, but maybe it's a way of going deeper. To show that we're learning properly and know how to critically tackle academic and practical concepts. Yeah, actually drawing together the academic and the practical, theoretical and practical, it's very difficult to demonstrate that sometimes in a way that we can say, okay, here, have a grade for that. So writing is one way of like capturing your thinking and understanding on paper in time. Check what we understand, we can enhance our skills, yes. To gauge our understanding, develop writing skills, yes. We are asked to write assignments because it is to check whether the student understands the topic and also if the student has new ideas they want to put across. Yeah, maybe it's a way of saying, like, what do you think about this? Just like, oops, sorry, in this exercise here, I have asked you, like, what do you think? And look, I have 9 lovely answers to my question. So I think there are elements of truth in everything you've said here. I think one of the reasons we write is because it gives us time to think and learn, and then of course that is a way for people to check the quality of like the teaching on a module. Like, have I taught you properly? I can see from your writing whether you've understood something or not. You can develop what we think are valuable skills while doing that. And writing is a way of like capturing your thinking and your arguments on paper in a way that a marker can spend time like really trying to understand and evaluate your thinking and your understanding. I know that like this is 2025 and that there are some people in the world who think that we don't need writing anymore because machines can do it for us. But I will always argue, and I will fight for this, that machines like generative AI do not write. They generate text, and they do it in a very sophisticated way, but just by fairly randomly, well, not entirely randomly, but using probability to put one word after another. I don't think that's the same as writing. I think, as we just said, like writing isn't a process where one word, check, hand in. It's thinking, reading, and trying to explain what we've understood through our writing. We spend time writing, and that can sometimes be tricky, but that's where we learn and we develop a much deeper understanding from doing that. So there you go. Thank you very much for all your answers here. We've spoken previously about how academic communities are all about, we care about knowledge, we value understanding, we value research, we value analysis, we value complexity, and we value respect. And actually, we can think about university assignments as something that allow you to show your knowledge, your understanding, and your ability to analyze. So I don't know if you will believe me or be persuaded by me. Maybe give me a thumbs up if you do, if you are. But I think we should be excited when you have to do. You're not going to believe me. Someone has already put a thumbs up, and I didn't say it yet. When a module gives you an assignment, I think we should be excited by that. This is an opportunity to show that what we can do. This is an opportunity to explore and expand our knowledge and to show what we've understood and to develop our understanding at the same time. See, nobody else is giving me a thumbs up for this, but yeah, a university assignment is an opportunity, something we should be happy about. Okay. I'm going to show you actually some examples of the kind of things that university staff write as feedback on good assignments and on bad assignments. And I hope this is visible enough, but I'll read them out for you. So on you'll see on the left hand of this table we've got the numbers 1 to 7, right? Actually descending from the top, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And on the left, we have comments that have been made on good work, and on the right, comments that have been made on poor work, as in like work that maybe doesn't pass or doesn't give you the grade that you want. All right? And these are like really commonly seen kind of statements or comments, pieces of feedback on student writing. So examples of feedback on good work: evaluates evidence, synthesizes materials clearly. Synthesizes is brings together and unites to develop persuasive arguments. Evidence used appropriately to support a conclusion. Independent thought, an accurate and critically reflective treatment of all the main issues. Willingness to engage critically with the literature and ability to go beyond it, mindful of other interpretations. That kind of speaks to what I said earlier about being critical, like being aware that there are other ways to think about an issue. Clear understanding of the nature of the material, ability to analyze materials and their implications. Sources used accurately and concisely but do not dominate. Good command of the literature, so the way that we use our reading and our writing here is being praised for being good and appropriate. The evidence of ability to select appropriately, as in select things that we read appropriately. Detailed and broad knowledge base, like showing that we know a lot. and good interpretation of the question fully and accurately. Those are all comments on good work. The kind of comments that we might see quite commonly on poor work go from has not clearly understood the assignment task, going up to need to refer to relevant literature, or some sources not academically rigorous. There's a strange noise going on around me in the building, so please do tell me if it's disturbing. I'll maybe just try to speak loudly. A lack of awareness of the content of the material does not go beyond just points derived from the, that would mean going beyond the assertion of points derived from the literature would be like describing or just paraphrasing what's in the literature and not doing anything more than that. Being mainly descriptive rather than being critical, making assertions that are baseless, as in just saying things without them being based on your reading, or nothing that comes from sources. Over reliant on being on too few sources, so only using a couple of perspectives, or not really understanding or using the reading material. Okay, now I have a challenge for you. I just read you some comments that relate to good work and to poor work, but on the left there are numbers 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And my question for you is, I'm inviting you to interpret this. What do you think the numbers might mean? And just to give you slightly, just in case you want to, I'm going to attempt to do something I might not be able to do. Here, let me take a screen capture and put it in the chat. So yeah, if you want to go through this text in any detail, because it's probably too small now, you can see in the chat I've taken a screenshot of the words I just showed you. So yeah, what's your interpretation? What does 1 mean? What does 2 mean? What do these different numbers mean? You feel free to take a guess. I know it's not an easy question, but have you got any idea what the numbers 1 to 7 might mean in this table? So far, no answers, no suggestions. There you go, criteria. The higher the number, the better the answer to the assignment. It corresponds to a higher grade. That's a perfectly good guess, but it's not correct. The number of points that each grade is worth. No, it's not a marking scheme like that, and we'll look at a marking scheme in a moment. Level of understanding, I think I know what you mean there, like 7 is higher and 1 is lower, but that's not the answer. Don't worry, I love these suggestions. I know it's a tricky question, and every time I do this workshop, I ask the same question, and it sometimes nobody gets the answer right, and that's no problem. But do keep guessing if you think you can see something that other students haven't said yet. And if you want to say, I don't know, you can just type in, I don't know. And if anyone wants to type in, please just tell us. I will move on and I'll tell you, but I'll let you guide the way. Okay, I'm going to go back to the previous slide so that you can see it a bit more clearly. Okay, so what the numbers mean, the numbers are actually related to like the stage in assignment writing. And this is really, really important. Number one, you'll see that in order to produce good work, you actually have to interpret the question fully and accurately. You have to understand the question you're being asked in order for any of the other things to follow. But similarly, if at the beginning you do not clearly understand the assignment task, then it's very likely that the other bad things will follow. Because if first you haven't understood the assignment correctly, it's likely that you're then not going to go to the right things to read or useful text to read, and then your reading might be inaccurate or limited, and so on and so on. Whereas you need to be able to interpret a question fully and accurately in order to then be directed towards reading the right texts and being able to select useful reading and developing that detailed and broad knowledge base that's referred to here. So actually, as you go through the stages of understanding, analyzing your assignment question, understanding the assignment brief, selecting what you read, and then doing the reading, and thinking clearly about the reading, we're then at point number 4, and we haven't actually started to write yet. So the time that we spend checking our understanding and doing research before we start writing is really important. The key to successful writing is not just the writing, it's what happens before the writing. Can you please give me a thumbs up if you're happy for me to continue? If anyone has any questions or anything you're not sure of, then please put it in the chat. But thank you, lots of thumbs up. Okay. I'm going to say something very briefly about marking criteria, because previously someone suggested that those numbers 1 to 7 might be the grades. That's not typically how we do things at the University of Hertfordshire. Now, what I expect you to be able to see, now, any assignment that you're given at Hertfordshire, as part of the instructions, maybe in a Word document or maybe as a PDF that you're given or that's made available on Canvas, possibly at the submission point on Canvas, you should be able to see the marking criteria. So in American English, this is more commonly referred to as rubric. So you might hear the term rubrics, or you might be more familiar with a term like rubric. But typically, not always, but typically it will look like this. So on the left, you'll have the grading criteria, and there'll be an element of the assignment that your marker is looking for. And these are all the different things that where the person setting the assignment is looking for, is giving you an opportunity to demonstrate. So it might be broken down into knowledge and understanding and skills. It might be about the way presentation. It may be something about your use of literature, your use of sources. Depending on the assignment and what the assignment is testing, you're going to have some different grading criteria. And then on the rest of the document, you should see a description of what it means to score above 70, what it means to score between 60 and 70, between 50 and 60, between 40 and 50, and then the different distinctions below 40. Often when we're looking at something like an essay, you'll see that we don't necessarily say, okay, your essay is a 54 or your essay is a 63. We will decide upon like a point on a scale, so 52, 55, 58, 62, 65, 68, and this is more common. Now, if you have previously studied in a different context, so as I am not in UK higher education, this may be surprising to you, but the number 70 in the UK represents excellence. So if you are if you're an undergraduate student, then 70 is considered first class, and if you're a master's student, then a 70 is a distinction. Now, that might not seem like a very high number to you, depending on what subject you've studied and where you've studied it. I know there are countries where you need to get 75 in order to pass. So the idea that 72 would be excellent might seem strange, but that's where we are. If you're a postgraduate student, then the pass mark will be 50. If you're an undergraduate student, then the pass mark will be 40. So important to know what is required in order to get like 50 or more, what is required in order to get 60 or more. And even more important, when you get feedback on the first assignment that you write, you can expect to see a number on this scale and comments that are helping to guide you see where you are with a current piece of work, and you could also look at what you would need to do in order to get the next grade up. Okay. Now, later in the year, because I don't expect you to have had feedback yet, we'll do a webinar on understanding and responding to feedback. I think when you look at, but I do want you to know that marking criteria is always made available to you in advance, so you can have a look at what is it that I'll be graded on. And it's important that you know, it's important that this is fair, right? You're graded on these things and not something else. The slide I'm sharing right now is not the marking criteria of an assignment that you yourself are probably writing. It's just an example of what a marking criteria might look like from a course at the University of Hertfordshire, because I also teach on a master's degree, and this is, I think this is from my own module. Okay. Quick question for you. Have you looked at any marking criteria on Canvas yet? Please let me know whether your answer is a yes or a no, or if you still don't actually know what my marking criteria are. If you don't know what Canvas is, please tell me. It would be good to know. And when you get if you haven't already been given assignments, then please do have a look when assignments are set. You can use these weekly webinars if you like to ask questions about what some of the language means, because in marking criteria, you might see something like synthesis or critical evaluation. And I don't think it's easy to understand what those words mean. So you're very welcome to ask questions about things like that. Okay. Thank you for answering that question. We're now going to move on to the final stage of this webinar, where we're going to analyze an assignment question and consider how we might answer it. So I've got 3 words for you here. What I want to suggest is that every university assignment that you're given, these three words can help you to get to the heart of that assignment and to understand what it's asking you to do and what you need to know and what you need to do. So these three words, the content is about what you need to know, the knowledge that you need to demonstrate. So in other words, like what's the subject? I don't mean like biology or geography, but what is the topic of the assignment that you're going to write? The word function is about like what you are being asked to do in that assignment. So you may be asked to write a critical reflection. So critically reflecting is a function of a piece of work. And the scope is really important. If you remember, one of the first statements we looked at in this webinar, it was this idea that you need to find out everything you can about a topic and put it all into an assignment. There will always be a more narrow scope than everything. So scope are the words in an assignment instruction that limit what you need to do. That includes like, oh, in 500 words, that means the scope of your assignment is 500 words. But let's look at an example actually from the area of international relations. So a colleague of mine kindly gave me this question years ago, and it's this is the assignment brief. Compare, contrast, and evaluate liberal and realist approaches to international relations. Now, I don't know if that looks like a simple question or not, but let's apply these words: concept, function, and scope. I have underlined in bold three words from the title: compare, contrast, and evaluate. And I'd just like you to tell me if these words represent the concept that's being tested, the function of the assignment, or the scope of the assignment. Compare, contrast, evaluate. Is that concept? Is it function? Or is it scope? I've got one response, but I hope that I can quickly get 10. So we've got 4 responses, 6 responses. Let's see if we can get some more. Compare, contrast, and evaluate. There are 3 concepts, 4 functions, 1 scope. Let's see if we can get 2 more responses. Function. Anyone else want to vote? Just remember that your responses are anonymous. I don't know who is saying what in response to these questions. But, and I suspect now I'm going to give you the answer. Maybe more people will respond. But thank you everyone who has attempted to answer this question. The correct answer is indeed function. So the function words are telling you what to do in your assignment. You need to compare, you need to contrast, and you need to evaluate. So function words are things like that: compare, contrast, evaluate, discuss, describe, explain. Okay, these are all function words. Right. Let's look at those words. Liberal and realist approaches. Are those words the concept that's been tested? Is this the knowledge you're being tested on? Is this the function of the assignment? I mean, we did just look at compare, contrast, and evaluate, and we decided they were the function. So if any of you choose the word function now, you might be trolling me. Okay, so is this the concept or is this the scope? 2 people are saying concepts. I think I'm not going to give you an answer to this question. I'm going to see if we can get 10 responses, and then I'm going to show you a third question. So far, 4 votes for concept, none for function and scope. So if I go on to the next slide, to international relations, is this concept, function, or scope? Compare, contrast, and evaluate liberal and realist approaches to international relations. One person straight away said scope. Is that because you answered concept? To the last question, we've got 3 scopes. So I'm going to quickly jump back to say, yes, liberal and realist approaches are the concept being tested by this assignment. So the person who set the assignment wants to see your ability to compare and contrast something, but also to evaluate. The thing that they want you to compare and contrast are liberal and realist approaches. And the scope of the essay, they only want you to write about approaches to international relations. They don't want you to write it about something else. So great. Compare. So we've got function, concept, and scope. And just a quick word that sometimes an assignment title will have like multiple function words. So here we've got compare, contrast, and evaluate. And I just want to point out that if you look at the marking criteria, I won't go back. But if you look at the marking criteria for any assignment, look at the kind of language that's used in the description of something that gets 70 or higher and compare it to 60 or higher and 50 or higher. You may find that the word evaluate appears more in the 60s and 70s. And that would suggest to me that the word evaluate is actually a bit more powerful. It's a bit more complex and potentially a little bit more difficult. But a student who can show that the ability to evaluate as well as to compare and contrast is likely to get a higher grade, because evaluation is a kind of a higher order function than compare and contrast. So do look out for these things. You may have multiple function words in an assignment, but they're not necessarily equal, and certainly not equal in terms of the quality of work you'll produce. In webinar 5, we've come to the end. In webinar 5, we're going to take a simple assignment question and use it in order to start like taking a position in order to in relation to the question you've been asked. Okay, I am going to stop there as usual. You can scan the QR code to register your attendance on this webinar, or you can follow the link that I've just put in the chat. And because I've put that link in the chat, I won't keep the QR code in there for much longer. But as usual, in the form on the QR code, there's a question about, do you have any comments, questions, or requests? So you can add that in the QR code, or you can put it in the chat.